I'm Emma Rodriguez, 29, and until 3 months ago, my family thought I was their biggest disappointment. While my siblings flaunted their trust funds and inheritance promises, I was working 80-hour weeks, sleeping on friends' couches, building what they called another one of Emma's silly little projects. At last month's family dinner, my mother actually said, "Emma dear, you're nothing without us. Why don't you just come home, and we'll find you a nice office job?" That night, I sat in my cramped studio apartment, staring at the Forbes magazine that had just arrived. There I was on the cover, 30 under 30, the coding prodigy who disrupted Silicon Valley. My app had just sold for $847 million. They had no idea their failure daughter was now worth more than the entire family combined. Tomorrow, I'm going home for Dad's birthday. They're about to learn the truth about their nothing daughter. Like this video if you've ever been underestimated by your own family, and subscribe to hear how this story unfolds. Growing up in the Rodriguez household meant understanding your place in the hierarchy, and mine was firmly at the bottom. My older brother Marcus and younger sister Victoria weren't just the favorites. They were treated like royalty, while I was the forgotten middle child who somehow never quite fit the family mold. Marcus, now 32, had been groomed since birth to take over Dad's commercial real estate empire. Even as a teenager, he drove a BMW that cost more than most people's annual salary. His trust fund kicked in at 21, providing him with a comfortable $50,000 monthly allowance that he spent on designer clothes, expensive restaurants, and a luxury downtown apartment. Marcus has the business mind, Dad would say proudly at family gatherings, completely ignoring the fact that Marcus had never worked a day in his life. Victoria, 27, was the princess who could do no wrong, beautiful, charming, and utterly spoiled. She'd been given a modeling career through Dad's connections and a trust fund that supported her artistic pursuits. Her Instagram account, filled with photos from European vacations and designer shopping sprees, garnered hundreds of thousands of followers who envied her seemingly perfect life. Mom called her our little socialite with genuine pride. Then, there was me, the computer nerd who preferred coding to cocktail parties, the daughter who asked too many questions and had opinions that made family dinners uncomfortable. While my siblings received new cars for birthdays, I got lectures about being more practical and less demanding. I discovered the trust fund documents by accident when I was 19, home from college for Christmas break. I'd been looking for batteries in Dad's desk drawer when I found the legal papers. 3 trust funds had been established, one for Marcus, one for Victoria, and notably, none for Emma. The lawyer's notes in the margins were particularly brutal. Client specified to children only. Third child deemed too independent and unlikely to represent family values appropriately. That night, I confronted Mom in the kitchen. "Why don't I have a trust fund?" I asked, holding the papers with shaking hands. She barely looked up from loading the dishwasher. "Oh, sweetheart, you're so smart and capable. You don't need our help like the others do. Besides, you've always been so determined to do things your own way." It was the first time I truly understood that my independence wasn't seen as was seen as defiance. My siblings' dependence was rewarded with millions of dollars, while my self-reliance was punished with exclusion. That Christmas, I watched Marcus complain about his trust fund manager while Victoria planned another expensive trip to Paris. They discussed their financial portfolios over dinner like it was casual conversation, never once acknowledging that their sister was working 3 part-time jobs just to afford textbooks. The trust fund documents became my wake-up call. I wasn't part of their plan because I wasn't part of their world. While they lived off family money, I would have to build everything from scratch. What they meant as punishment, I decided to turn into my greatest strength. I folded those documents carefully and kept them in my desk drawer as a reminder. I would never need their approval or their money. I would build something they could never take away from me. The eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday morning in March, during my junior year at Stanford. I stared at the yellow paper taped to my apartment door, my hands trembling as I read the words, "Final notice, vacate, within 72 hours. 3 months behind on rent." Despite working as a teaching assistant, tutoring struggling students, and pulling weekend shifts at a campus coffee shop, I called Mom first, my voice cracking as I explained the situation. "I just need help with this month's rent," I pleaded. "I can pay you back once I graduate and get a job." "Oh, Emma," she sighed, and I could hear the disappointment in her voice. You know we can't just bail you out every time you make poor financial decisions. This is exactly why we've been telling you to be more practical about your major. Computer science isn't going to pay the bills, honey. The irony wasn't lost on me. At that very moment, Marcus was in Cabo San Lucas posting Instagram stories from a $500 per night resort funded entirely by his trust fund. Victoria had just bought a new Mercedes, complaining on social media that the color wasn't quite right. What about just a loan? I tried again, swallowing my pride. I'll sign papers, pay interest, whatever you need. Emma, we've discussed this. You need to learn responsibility. Have you considered changing your major to something more stable? Business, maybe. We could help you transfer to a less expensive school. Less expensive meant community college. It meant giving up my computer science degree at one of the world's top tech universities. It meant abandoning everything I'd worked for because asking for $1,800 in emergency help was apparently too much. I hung up and immediately called Dad's office. His secretary put me through after I explained it was urgent. Princess, he said, using the childhood nickname that now felt hollow. Your mother told me about your situation. Look, tough love is sometimes necessary. You've always been too proud to accept our guidance. Maybe this is the wake-up call you need. Dad, I'm 3 months from graduating. I have job interviews lined up with tech companies. I just need job interviews, aren't job offers. Emma, you're living in a fantasy world. Come home, help out with the family business, and we'll get you sorted out. Help out with the family business meant being Marcus's assistant, filing papers and fetching coffee while he played CEO. I'd seen this offer extended to family, friends, children who'd disappointed their parents. It was career suicide disguised as generosity. That evening, I sat in my tiny apartment surrounded by moving boxes, looking at the eviction notice that would change everything. My laptop was open to 3 different coding projects I'd been working on, including an app idea that had been consuming my thoughts for months, a social platform that could revolutionize how people connected over shared interests and local events. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. Just bought the cutest shoes. Dad's treating me to a shopping spree because I got a call back for a commercial. Life is so good. The contrast was staggering. While I faced homelessness for needing less than $2,000, my sister was celebrating another cash windfall for a modeling gig she'd gotten through family connections. I folded the eviction notice carefully and placed it in my desk drawer, right next to the trust fund documents. 2 pieces of paper that defined my relationship with my family, exclusion and abandonment when I needed them most. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't going home. I wasn't changing majors. I wasn't accepting defeat. I was going to sleep in my car if necessary, finish my degree, and prove that their irresponsible daughter could build something extraordinary without their help. Living in my 2007 Honda Civic taught me more about innovation than any Stanford classroom ever could. For 3 months, I parked in different spots around campus, showered at the gym, and turned my back seat into a mobile office. The irony wasn't lost on me. While my family thought I was failing, I was actually having the most productive period of my life. The app idea had been brewing since freshman year, but homelessness gave me the clarity to finally focus. I called it LocalLink, a platform that connected people based on shared interests and geographical proximity. Not just another dating app or social network, but something that could help people find their community, whether they were looking for hiking partners, study groups, or just someone to grab coffee with. My first prototype sketches were drawn on napkins from the campus cafeteria, refined on the back of lecture handouts, and finally transferred to a notebook I'd bought with spare change. The drawings were crude but comprehensive: user interface, mock-ups, database architecture diagrams, and flowcharts mapping every user interaction. Late at night, with my laptop balanced on my steering wheel and my phone's hotspot providing internet, I coded furiously. The breakthrough came during a computer science lecture on network algorithms. Professor Chen was explaining how to optimize data connections when suddenly everything clicked. I saw exactly how to solve LocalLink's core challenge: how to match people authentically without the superficiality that plagued other platforms. I spent that entire night coding, my fingers flying across the keyboard while parked behind the engineering building. By sunrise, I had a working prototype that could actually connect users based on shared interests, location, and compatibility scores derived from their activity patterns. The first beta test was with my study group, 5 other CS students who'd become my closest friends during this difficult time. Within hours, the app had connected 2 of them with a hiking group, helped another find a study partner for organic chemistry, and linked me with a coding meet happening that weekend. "Emma, this is incredible," said Sarah, one of my study partners. "This isn't just an app, it's actually building real communities." But developing LocalLink while homeless came with unique challenges. I had to be strategic about charging my laptop and phone, often camping out in 24-hour diners with just a coffee to justify using their power outlets for hours. I learned to code in the dark to avoid drawing attention from campus security, and I became an expert at finding Wi-Fi dead zones where I could work undisturbed. The loneliness was the hardest part. While my classmates went home to families who supported their dreams, I spent nights debugging code in a parking lot, wondering if I was completely delusional. I'd see Marcus's Instagram posts from expensive restaurants and Victoria's designer haul videos, and I'd question whether I was making the right choice. But then I'd look at my prototype sketches, at the elegant solution I'd drawn for connecting people who truly belonged together, and I'd remember why I was doing this. Every line of code was proof that I didn't need their money or their approval to build something meaningful. The app's core algorithm was my masterpiece, a machine learning system that analyzed user behavior patterns, communication styles, and interest alignments to suggest connections that had real potential. It wasn't just matching people, it was helping them find their tribe. By the end of my senior year, LocalLink had grown from napkin sketches to a fully functional app with over 500 beta users. The prototype sketches I'd drawn in that notebook had become the foundation for something that was already changing lives on a small scale. I kept those original sketches in a folder labeled Proof of Concept, but they were really proof of something else, that desperation could fuel innovation, that having nothing to lose could be the greatest advantage of all. My family thought I was living in failure, but I was actually living in the future. I was building for myself, one line of code at a time. Stanford's graduation ceremony was held on a perfect June morning, with thousands of families gathering to celebrate their children's achievements. I sat in the sea of computer science graduates, adjusting my cap and gown, trying not to look at the empty seats in the family section where the Rodriguez clan should have been sitting. They'd had 3 months' notice. I'd sent the invitation, made phone calls, even offered to pay for their flights and hotel rooms. The responses had been predictably disappointing. "Oh, sweetheart, that's the same weekend as Victoria's modeling showcase in New York," Mom had explained. "You understand how important this opportunity is for her career. We'll celebrate when you get home." Dad's excuse was even more insulting. "Princess, you're graduating with a computer degree. It's not like you're becoming a doctor or lawyer. We'll take you out to dinner sometime to celebrate." Marcus hadn't even bothered to respond to the invitation. As my name was called, Emma Rodriguez, Bachelor of Science in Computer Science, magna cum laude, I walked across that stage alone. My friend Sarah's parents cheered for me from their section, treating me like their own daughter. But it wasn't the same. In all the graduation photos, there's an empty space next to me where my family should have been celebrating the first person in Rodriguez history to graduate from Stanford. The irony was staggering. That same weekend, while I was achieving what should have been considered the family's greatest academic accomplishment, Victoria was at a modeling event that Dad later described as the highlight of our year. Her Instagram was full of family photos from the showcase, Mom beaming with pride, Dad networking with agency executives, Marcus playing the supportive big brother. Meanwhile, my magna cum laude distinction earned, while homeless, working multiple jobs, and building a revolutionary app warranted a single text message: "Congrats, honey, so proud. Let's catch up soon." After the ceremony, I went to dinner with my chosen family, Sarah and her parents, my study group, and 3 beta users of LocalLink who'd become genuine friends. They made toasts about my accomplishments, asked thoughtful questions about my post-graduation plans, and celebrated my achievements with the enthusiasm my biological family couldn't muster. That evening, I sat in my tiny studio apartment, the first stable housing I'd had in months, and looked at my graduation photos. In group shots with friends, I was radiant, laughing, clearly surrounded by people who valued me. In the solo shots, holding my diploma, I looked proud but unmistakably alone. I posted one photo on social media, me, in cap and gown, holding my computer science degree, with the caption, "Stanford grad, ready to change the world." The responses were telling. Friends and classmates filled the comments with congratulations and excitement. My family's engagement was minimal, a few likes, no comments. But Victoria's modeling showcase post from that same day received a paragraph-long comment from Mom about how proud we are of our stunning daughter and how this is just the beginning of her incredible journey. The message was clear. Academic excellence earned through struggle and determination was less valuable than genetic beauty showcased through family connections. I carefully filed my graduation photos next to the trust fund documents and eviction notice, another milestone, another reminder that I was building my success story completely on my own. The check arrived on a Tuesday in September, exactly 3 months after my graduation that no one attended. $2 million from Meridian Ventures, made out to Local Link Technologies LLC, with my name as the CEO. I stared at it for a solid 10 minutes, sitting in my cramped Palo Alto apartment, trying to comprehend that this piece of paper represented more money than my family had ever given me, and more than they probably thought I'd make in my entire lifetime. The pitch meeting had been surreal. 3 months of networking, refining my presentation, and bootstrapping Local Link's growth had led to a conference room on Sand Hill Road, facing 5 venture capitalists who actually understood what I'd built. Unlike my family, they grasped the revolutionary potential of authentic community building technology. Your user engagement metrics are exceptional, Jennifer Walsh, the lead partner, had said during my presentation. 93% of users who make a connection through Local Link meet in person within 2 weeks. That's not just an app, that's social infrastructure. When they offered $2 million for 18% equity, valuing my silly little project at $11 million, I had to excuse myself to the bathroom to avoid crying in front of potential investors. In that moment, I became worth more than Marcus's entire trust fund, and no one in my family had any idea. The funding allowed me to quit my 3 part-time jobs and focus entirely on Local Link. I hired my first employees, Sarah, as my CTO, and 2 other Stanford graduates who believed in the mission. We moved into a small office space in downtown Palo Alto, and suddenly I was running a real company with real employees and real potential. But the most difficult part wasn't managing the business, it was managing the secret. At family gatherings, I continued to play the role of the struggling daughter. When asked about work, I'd vaguely mention consulting projects or freelance coding. Meanwhile, Local Link was growing exponentially, adding thousands of users every month and attracting attention from major tech companies. The October family dinner was particularly surreal. I sat at our familiar dining room table, wearing a Target dress and claiming I was still figuring things out career-wise, while my phone buzzed with notifications about Local Link crossing 50,000 active users. Marcus spent the entire meal complaining about his trust fund manager's investment choices, completely unaware that his loser sister had generated better returns in 6 months than his portfolio had in 6 years. Emma, honey, have you considered going back to school? Mom suggested over dessert. Maybe get an MBA. It might help you find direction. Direction. I was directing a company that was revolutionizing how people build genuine communities, but she saw directionlessness. Or you could come work with me, Marcus offered condescendingly. I could use someone to handle the computer stuff. The pay wouldn't be great initially, but it's steady work. Computer stuff. He was offering me an entry-level position managing his basic website while I was running a tech company that venture capitalists were calling the future of social connection. The hardest moment came when Dad pulled me aside after dinner. Princess, I know you're struggling, and I respect that you want to be independent, but there's no shame in accepting family help. We could set up a small monthly allowance, just until you get on your feet. An allowance? From people who were completely oblivious to the fact that I no longer needed their money, that I probably never would again. I kept the investment check in my desk drawer for weeks before depositing it, not out of uncertainty, but because it represented something profound, validation that my worth wasn't determined by my family's opinion. Independent experts had evaluated my work and decided it was worth millions. The check was proof that while my family saw failure, the rest of the world saw potential. While they offered charity, the market offered partnership. While they provided conditional love based on conformity, my chosen family of investors, employees, and users provided support based on results. Every day that I kept my success secret, I grew stronger and more confident. Local Link was thriving, my team was brilliant, and my vision was becoming reality. Soon, Very soon, I wouldn't be able to hide my success anymore. And honestly, I was starting to look forward to that conversation. By December, maintaining my double life had become an art form. The lease agreement for my downtown San Francisco penthouse was signed under my LLC, 28 floors above the city, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the bay, 2 bedrooms, a home office that could rival any corporate headquarters, and a monthly rent that exceeded what my parents thought I made in 6 months. But every time I visited family, I drove my old Honda and changed into thrift store clothes in a Target parking lot. I'd learned to hide my manicured nails, remove my expensive jewelry, and adopt the slightly defeated posture of someone still figuring it out. The performance was exhausting but necessary. The psychological toll was heavier than I'd anticipated. Living in luxury while pretending to struggle created a strange cognitive dissonance. Some mornings, I'd wake up in my king-sized bed with custom Italian linens, look out at my spectacular view, and then spend an hour mentally preparing to convince my family I was still their charity case. Christmas dinner was the ultimate test. I arrived in my struggling daughter, costume-wrinkled jeans, an old sweater, scuffed shoes, while hiding the fact that I'd just returned from a business trip to New York where LocalLink had signed its first major corporate client for $300,000 annually. "Emma, you look thin," Mom fretted, immediately assuming financial stress. "Are you eating enough? Do you need us to send some groceries?" I was actually in the best shape of my life, thanks to the private trainer and nutritionist I could now afford, but I accepted her concern with appropriate gratitude. "I'm managing okay, thanks." Meanwhile, Victoria was showing off her new Cartier bracelet, just because gift from while Marcus discussed his plans to buy a vacation home in Aspen with his trust fund distributions. The most surreal moment came when Dad asked about my computer hobby. "Are you still playing around with that app thing?" he asked dismissively. "Maybe it's time to focus on something more realistic." That app thing had just reached 100,000 active users and was generating $50,000 in monthly revenue. We'd been featured in TechCrunch, Wired, and the Wall Street Journal. But I nodded and said, "Yeah, still working on it." After dinner, I excused myself to take a work call, actually a conversation with a Fortune 500 company interested in licensing LocalLink's technology for their employee engagement program. I stood in my childhood bathroom, discussing a potentially multi-million-dollar deal while my family downstairs debated whether to buy me a gift card to help with my situation. The hardest part wasn't the deception itself, it was the isolation. I had no one to share my real life with except my employees and investors. I couldn't celebrate victories, couldn't seek advice about challenges, couldn't even complain about the stress of rapid growth. My family thought I was failing, so every conversation was colored by their pity and unsolicited advice. I'd created 2 complete identities: Emma, the CEO, living in luxury and building an empire, and Emma, the disappointment, struggling to make ends meet. The CEO version had a team of 12 employees, advisors from top tech companies, and a calendar packed with high-stakes meetings. The disappointment version had concerned parents offering to pay for groceries. On New Year's Eve, I stood alone on my penthouse balcony, watching fireworks over the San Francisco Bay. My phone was full of congratulations from my professional network. LocalLink had been named one of the year's most promising startups by 3 major publications, but my family's messages were filled with generic encouragement. "This will be your year, sweetie. And keep trying, princess." The lease agreement on my coffee table reminded me of how far I'd actually come. In less than a year, I'd gone from sleeping in my car to living in one of the city's most exclusive buildings. But the price of that success was a loneliness I hadn't anticipated, the isolation of being completely misunderstood by the people who were supposed to know me best. Soon, I promised myself, this double life would end. The question wasn't whether my family would discover the truth, but when I'd be ready to reveal it. The call came on a Thursday morning in February while I was having coffee in my penthouse, watching the sunrise over the Bay Bridge. David Chen, CEO of Nexus Technologies, one of Silicon Valley's most powerful companies, wanted to schedule an immediate meeting, not a casual coffee or exploratory conversation, but a formal acquisition discussion. "Emma, what you've built with LocalLink isn't just impressive, it's revolutionary," he said during our video call. "We've been watching your user engagement metrics, your growth trajectory, your community building success rate. We want to acquire LocalLink and integrate your technology into our ecosystem." The initial offer was breathtaking. $847 million for 100% of local link, with me staying on as head of community technologies and receiving additional equity in Nexus. After my investor payouts and employee stock options, I would personally clear over $600 million. $600 million. More money than Marcus and Victoria's trust funds combined. More than my parents' entire real estate portfolio. More than the Rodriguez family's total net worth accumulated over 3 generations. The irony was exquisite. That same week, I'd sat through another family dinner where Mom suggested I consider becoming a teacher because it offered job security, and Marcus had offered to pull some strings to get me an administrative assistant position at his company. The due diligence process took 3 months of intensive meetings, financial audits, and technology reviews. Nexus's team of experts examined every aspect of local link, our algorithms, user data, growth projections, competitive advantages. They interviewed our employees, analyzed our code architecture, and stress-tested our scalability models. Every evaluation confirmed what I already knew. We'd built something extraordinary. LocalLink wasn't just connecting people, it was creating lasting communities. Our users weren't just engaging with an app, they were building real relationships that extended far beyond digital interactions. Your platform has a 94% user satisfaction rate, the lead analyst reported during one session. That's unheard of in social technology. You've solved the authenticity problem that's plagued every major platform. During those 3 months, I continued my double life with increasingly surreal results. I'd spend mornings in Nexus's boardroom discussing integration strategies worth hundreds of millions, then drive to family dinners in my old Honda to discuss my lack of career direction. The final contract signing was scheduled for a Friday afternoon in May. I sat in Nexus's executive conference room, surrounded by lawyers, executives, and advisors, holding a pen that would make me one of the youngest female tech entrepreneurs to achieve a 9-figure exit. But before I signed, I thought about my family's upcoming reunion. Dad's 65th birthday celebration planned for the following month. 3 generations of Rodriguez's gathering to celebrate the family patriarch, with everyone expected to share updates about their lives and achievements. I signed the contract and immediately asked Nexus's communications team to coordinate with Forbes magazine for an exclusive interview about the acquisition. If my family wanted updates about my life, they were going to get them. The $847 million acquisition made me independently wealthy beyond most people's wildest dreams. But more importantly, it gave me something my family had never provided: validation that my worth wasn't determined by their approval. The contract in my safe was proof that while they saw failure, the market saw brilliance. While they offered pity, the world offered partnership. Soon, very soon, they would understand exactly who Emma Rodriguez had become. The Forbes photographer arrived at my penthouse at 8 a.m. sharp, followed by journalist Rebecca Martinez, who would be conducting the interview for their 30 Under 30 special edition. As they set up professional lighting equipment in my living room, I realized this moment would change everything. Once this article published, my double life would be over. Emma, your story is remarkable, Rebecca began, settling into the chair across from me. 29 years old, Stanford graduate, sleeping in your car just 5 years ago, and now you've just completed one of the largest tech acquisitions in recent history. Let's start at the beginning. I told her about LocalLink's origins, the napkin sketches, the late nights coding in parking lots, the beta testing with my study group. But when she asked about my family's support during the early days, I paused. This was the moment I'd been dreading and anticipating for months. My family didn't support my entrepreneurial ambitions, I said carefully. They thought computer science was impractical and my app ideas were unrealistic. When I was facing eviction during my senior year at Stanford, I asked for help with rent. They suggested I change majors and transfer to a cheaper school instead. Rebecca leaned forward. How did that rejection shape your approach to building LocalLink? It taught me that validation has to come from within and from results, not from people who don't understand your vision. My family saw my independence as defiance, but that independence became my greatest asset. The questions became more pointed. Do they know about your success now? I looked out at the San Francisco skyline, choosing my words carefully. They know I work in tech, but they don't know the scope of what I've built. I've been protecting them from having to reconcile their assumptions about me with reality. That must be incredibly isolating. It is, but but it's also been clarifying. I've learned to build my own support system: investors who believe in my vision, employees who share my mission, users who benefit from our platform. Sometimes your chosen family understands you better than your biological family. When Rebecca asked about my future plans, I couldn't help but smile. I'm going to continue building technology that brings people together authentically. And I'm going to start being honest about my success instead of hiding it to protect other people's feelings. The photo shoot was surreal. As I posed with my acquisition contract, holding the check that represented my life-changing exit, I thought about my parents' reactions when they saw their struggling daughter on the cover of America's most prestigious business magazine. The photographer captured dozens of shots, me at my desk overlooking the bay, standing next to the whiteboard where I'd mapped out Local Link's growth strategy, holding my original prototype sketches. Each image told the story of a journey my family had never understood or supported. One final question, Rebecca said as we wrapped up. What would you say to other young entrepreneurs whose families don't believe in their dreams? I thought about my trust fund exclusion, my graduation they didn't attend, the countless dinners where they'd suggested I'd be more realistic. I'd tell them that other people's limited vision doesn't have to become your limited reality. Build something so undeniably successful that their opinions become irrelevant. And remember, the people who dismiss your dreams usually have the smallest dreams themselves. The interview transcript, when published, would reveal everything: my homelessness, my family's lack of support, my extraordinary success, and my journey from sleeping in a car to selling a company for nearly $1 billion. Next month, at Dad's birthday party, my family would finally meet the real Emma Rodriguez. The Forbes publication schedule showed my cover story would hit newsstands on Tuesday, June 18th, exactly 1 week before Dad's 65th birthday celebration. I'd coordinated the timing perfectly with their editorial team, ensuring maximum impact for the family gathering. The advance copy arrived at my penthouse on Monday evening. Seeing my face on the cover of Forbes was surreal. Professional headshot, confident smile, with the headline, "The Coding Prodigy Who Disrupted Silicon Valley," and a smaller tagline, "How Emma Rodriguez Built a $847 million company while her family thought she was failing." I held the magazine with trembling hands, flipping to the 6-page feature article. The photos were stunning. Me in my penthouse office, standing next to awards from tech conferences, holding my original prototype sketches. But it was the pull quotes that would devastate my family. When I was facing eviction during my senior year at Stanford, I asked my family for help with rent. They suggested I change majors and transfer to a cheaper school instead. My family saw my independence as defiance, but that independence became my greatest asset. Sometimes your chosen family understands you better than your biological family. The article detailed everything: my exclusion from family trust funds, graduating magna cum laude with no family in attendance, sleeping in my car while developing Local Link, the months of maintaining a double life while building a revolutionary company. Rebecca Martinez had crafted the story beautifully, positioning me not as vindictive but as resilient. The narrative focused on innovation, determination, and the power of believing in yourself when no one else will. But between the lines, any reader, especially my family, would understand the depth of their dismissal and the magnitude of their Tuesday morning, I sat in my favorite coffee shop watching social media explode. The Forbes article was being shared across LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook. Tech industry leaders were commenting on my journey, congratulating me on the acquisition, and sharing their own stories of family doubt. My phone started buzzing with calls from numbers I didn't recognize: journalists wanting follow-up interviews, speaking engagement requests, congratulations from Stanford classmates who'd seen the article. But notably absent were calls from my family. Either they hadn't seen it yet, or they were too stunned to respond. By Wednesday, the story had reached mainstream media. CNN picked it up for a segment on young entrepreneurs, and the Today Show wanted me for an interview about overcoming family adversity. The validation from the wider world was overwhelming. Thousands of comments from people sharing their own stories of being underestimated by family. But the silence from the Rodriguez clan was deafening. No calls, no texts, no social media acknowledgments. Either they were processing the revelation that their failure daughter was now worth more than all of them combined, or they were strategizing their response. Dad's birthday party was scheduled for Saturday. The invitations had been sent months ago, before anyone knew that the guest list would include not just Emma the disappointment, but Emma the Forbes cover story, Emma the tech entrepreneur, Emma the woman who'd proved them all catastrophically wrong. I spent the week mentally preparing for a conversation that was 5 years in the making. The drive to my parents' house in Atherton took 45 minutes, but it felt like traveling through time. I'd made this journey dozens of times over the years, always as the disappointing daughter, returning to face judgment and pity. Today, I was returning as someone completely different. I'd chosen my outfit carefully, a tailored black blazer, designer jeans, and shoes that cost more than most people's monthly rent. No more Target clearance clothes or apologetic posture. If we were going to have this conversation, I was going to have it as the real Emma Rodriguez. The original invitation, now framed in my home office, read, "Join us in celebrating Richard Rodriguez's 65th birthday, a life well lived, a family well loved." The irony of that tagline wasn't lost on me. Well loved, except for the daughter they'd systematically excluded and dismissed. As I pulled into the circular driveway of my childhood home, I could see the familiar cars: Marcus's new Tesla, Victoria's white Mercedes, and several vehicles belonging to extended family. The house looked exactly as it always had: imposing, perfectly manicured, a monument to traditional success built on real estate wealth and inherited privilege. I sat in my car for a moment, holding the Forbes magazine that would change everything. 5 years of hiding, 5 years of pretending, 5 years of letting them believe their narrative about my failure. Today, all of that ended. The front door opened before I could ring the bell. Mom appeared, and I could immediately see the confusion in her eyes as she took in my appearance. This wasn't the downtrodden daughter she expected. "Emma, you look different," she said, her voice carrying that familiar note of concern mixed with disapproval. "Are those new clothes? I hope you're not spending money you don't have trying to impress us." Before I could respond, Dad appeared behind her, and his reaction was even more telling. His eyes narrowed as he assessed my outfit, clearly calculating what my appearance might cost and wondering where the money had come from. "Princess, you clean up nice," he said, but there was suspicion in his voice. "Things must be looking up." I smiled and kissed his cheek. "Happy birthday, Dad." "Yes, things are definitely looking up." As I walked into the house where I'd grown up feeling like an outsider, I could feel the weight of the Forbes magazine in my purse. The invitation that had brought me here would soon become a historical artifact, the last family gathering where they would treat me as their disappointing child. By the end of today, everything would be different. The living room was filled with 3 generations of Rodriguez family members, all gathered to celebrate Dad's milestone birthday. As I walked in, conversations paused, not out of excitement to see me, but out of confusion about my transformed appearance. The awkward silence was broken by my cousin Maria's whispered comment to her mother, "Is that really Emma? She looks so put together." Marcus was the first to approach, drink in hand, wearing his characteristic smirk. Well, look who decided to dress up for once. "Did you borrow those clothes, Em? They look expensive." Before I could respond, Victoria appeared, stunning as always, in a designer dress that probably cost more than most people's cars. "Emma, you look amazing. Wait, are those Lubov?" She bent down to examine my shoes with the expertise of someone who spent her trust fund on fashion. "Those are like $3,000. How did you?" "Maybe she's finally dating someone with money," Marcus interrupted with a laugh. "About time you found a sugar daddy to take care of you." The casual cruelty of their assumptions was breathtaking. Even when I appeared successful, they couldn't imagine that success coming from my own efforts. It had to be borrowed clothes, a generous boyfriend, or some other external source. Uncle Roberto joined our conversation, beaming with paternal pride as he showed off photos on his phone. "Look at my Sandra's graduation from medical school. And here's David's promotion at the law firm. The kids are doing so well." He turned to me with that pitying expression I knew so well. "Emma, sweetie, what are you up to these days?" "Still playing with computers." Playing with computers? As if Local Link's $847 million acquisition was equivalent to a toddler's game. Dinner was announced, and we gathered around the familiar dining room table where I'd endured countless humiliations over the years. The seating arrangement was telling. I was placed at the far end, between elderly Aunt Carmen, who was mostly deaf, and cousin Miguel's teenage son, who spent the entire meal on his phone. During the traditional toast sharing, each family member stood to honor Dad and share their recent accomplishments. Marcus talked about his real estate ventures, all funded by his trust fund. Victoria discussed her modeling career and upcoming acting auditions, all arranged through Dad's connections. When it was my turn, the table fell silent with that particular quiet that precedes obligatory politeness. I could see Mom's encouraging but worried smile, Dad's slightly impatient expression, and my siblings' barely concealed smirks. "I'm so proud of everything Dad has built," I began, standing with my wineglass. "He's taught us all about the value of hard work and determination. I've been working on something special myself, and I think Dad would be proud of what I've accomplished." Marcus snorted softly. "Let me guess, another app idea." The condescension in his voice was exactly what I'd been waiting for. I reached into my purse and pulled out the Forbes magazine, still in its protective sleeve. "Actually," I said, placing it on the table, "it's a little bigger than that." The silence that followed was deafening. 23 family members stared at the Forbes magazine lying in the center of our dining room table like a bomb that hadn't exploded yet. My face smiled back at them from the cover, confident and successful, with the headline that would shatter every assumption they'd made about me. Dad was the first to lean forward, squinting at the cover without his reading glasses. "Is that Emma, the coding prodigy who disrupted Silicon Valley?" Mom read aloud, her voice growing fainter with each word. "How Emma Rodriguez built $847 million company while her family thought she was failing." The magazine passed from hand to hand like evidence in a courtroom. I watched their faces change as the reality sank in confusion, giving way to shock. Shock giving way to something between awe and horror. Victoria was the first to speak, her voice barely a whisper. $847 million. "Emma, this is real." I nodded calmly. "Local links sold to Nexus Technologies 3 weeks ago. The Forbes interview was conducted last month, and the story went live on Tuesday." Marcus grabbed the magazine from Victoria's hands, frantically flipping to the article. "This has to be some kind of joke. Emma doesn't have, she can't." He stopped reading and looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Genuine fear. "Oh my God," he whispered. "You're serious?" Uncle Roberto leaned over Marcus's shoulder, reading sections of the article aloud. "Rodriguez funded her startup by sleeping in her car during college, after her family refused to help with basic living expenses." "Emma, is this true?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. I looked around the table at faces that had dismissed me for years, and I felt a calm settle over me that I'd never experienced before. "Every word," I said simply, including the part about asking for help with rent during my senior year at Stanford and being told to transfer to community college instead. Dad's face had gone pale. "Emma, we were trying to teach you responsibility by excluding me from family trust funds, by missing my graduation, by offering me charity while my siblings got monthly allowances." I kept my voice level, factual. "The article covers all of that." Aunt Carmen, who I'd thought was too deaf to follow the conversation, suddenly spoke up with startling clarity. "She's worth more than all of us combined." The mathematical reality was sinking in. Victoria's trust fund, $5 million. Marcus's trust fund, $8 million. Mom and Dad's real estate portfolio, roughly $50 million. The entire Rodriguez family wealth, accumulated over 3 generations, approximately $75 million. My personal net worth after the local link acquisition, over $600 million. "This changes everything," Mom whispered, and the naked hunger in her voice was exactly what I'd expected. "Does it?" I asked. "Because nothing has changed about me. I'm the same person who asked for help 5 years ago and was told I was too independent. I'm the same person whose graduation you missed because Victoria had a modeling showcase. I'm the same person you've been offering charity to while I was building this." Marcus was still reading the article, and his face grew more uncomfortable with each paragraph. "It says here that you've been living in a penthouse in San Francisco. For how long?" 18 months, while coming to family dinners, pretending to struggle. "While you all assumed I was struggling, I corrected. I never lied about my situation. You simply never asked the right questions." Dad finally found his voice. "Emma, why didn't you tell us? We're your family. We should have known about your success." The question I'd been waiting for. I looked around the table at these people who shared my DNA but had never shared my dreams, my struggles, or my victories. "Tell you what, exactly?" "That the daughter you excluded from trust funds had become more successful than the children you funded." that the computer hobby you dismissed was revolutionizing how people connect, that while you were teaching me about responsibility, I was learning that family isn't defined by blood, but by who shows up when you need them. I stood up, smoothing my blazer. You want to know why I didn't tell you? Because I learned that your approval was never necessary for my success. The people who believed in me were strangers who became investors, employees who became family, users who became a community. You taught me the most valuable lesson of all. I didn't need you. The Forbes magazine remained on the table as I walked toward the door, a physical reminder that sometimes the children you underestimate become the ones who surpass you entirely. Emma, wait. Dad's voice stopped me at the front door. Behind him, the entire family had risen from the table, following like a pack of suddenly very interested relatives. You can't just drop this bomb and leave. We need to talk about this. I turned to face them, noting how different their expressions were now. Gone was the casual dismissal, the pitying concern, the condescending offers of help. In their place was something much more familiar to anyone who'd achieved sudden wealth: intense, calculating interest. What exactly do you want to talk about, Dad? I asked. Marcus stepped forward, the Forbes magazine still clutched in his hand. This article. Some of these details are exaggerated, right? I mean, the numbers, the timeline, which details specifically. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. Would you like to see my account balances? Or maybe the acquisition contract? I have copies of everything. The silence was thick with discomfort. Victoria was the first to crack. Emma, we didn't know you were struggling so much in college. If you had just explained the situation better. I asked for help with $1,800 for rent. I interrupted. I explained that I was facing eviction. Mom told me it was a learning experience about poor financial decisions. Those were your exact words. Mom's face flushed red. I was trying to teach you independence. You were protecting Marcus and Victoria's inheritance, I said flatly. Just like when you excluded me from the trust funds. Just like when you missed my graduation for Victoria's modeling showcase. Just like every time you chose their convenience over my achievements. Uncle Roberto, who'd been quiet during the exchange, suddenly spoke up. Emma, familia is familia. Blood is thicker than water. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it. Uncle Roberto, that's not even the complete saying. The full quote is, the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. It means the bonds you choose are stronger than the bonds you're born with. I learned that lesson very well. Dad tried a different approach, his voice taking on that paternal tone he used when he wanted to control a situation. Princess, I understand you're hurt, but we're still your family. Your success is our success. We're proud of you now. You're proud, I said. When you thought I was failing, I was an embarrassment. Now that Forbes has declared me successful, suddenly I'm family again. Marcus was getting agitated, his sense of entitlement flaring. Look, Emma, we get it. You're rich now. Congratulations, but don't act like we didn't support you. We offered you jobs, advice. You offered me an entry-level position filing papers while I was running a company worth hundreds of millions. I cut him off. You offered advice to change majors while I was building revolutionary technology. You offered charity while I was creating wealth that dwarfs everything this family has ever achieved. The truth was hitting them in waves, and I could see the family dynamics shifting in real time. Suddenly, the trust fund babies were looking at the family outcast as their potential financial salvation. Victoria tried tears, her most reliable manipulation tool. Emma, I'm sorry we didn't understand what you were going through, but we're family. Can't we move past this? I mean, with your success, maybe you could help with some of our projects. There it was, not even an hour after discovering my wealth, and they were already positioning themselves for financial benefit. I pulled out my phone and showed them my latest bank statement. My liquid assets alone exceed all of your trust funds combined. My real estate portfolio includes properties in 3 states. My investment portfolio generates more in monthly dividends than most people make in a year. The numbers on the screen were undeniable proof of a success they'd never imagined possible from their failure daughter. So here's what's going to happen, I continued, putting the phone away. You're going to read that Forbes article very carefully. You're going to understand exactly how your treatment shaped my journey. And then you're going to decide whether you want a relationship with the real Emma Rodriguez, or whether you just want access to her bank account. I opened the front door, because unlike you, I don't confuse love with financial dependence. As I stood in the doorway, Dad made one last, desperate attempt to regain control of the narrative. Emma, you're being dramatic. We've always been here for you. If you're successful now, that's partly because of the values we instilled in you. I stopped and turned back, pulling out my phone one more time. Dad, since we're talking about family values and support, let me share something interesting I discovered recently. I scrolled to a real estate app and showed him a property listing. This house is worth approximately $2 million, right? Based on recent Atherton property sales. He nodded cautiously, unsure where I was heading. I could buy it cash, today, without affecting my lifestyle or investment strategy. I swiped to another screen. In fact, I've been looking at properties in this neighborhood. There's a 15 mil estate 3 blocks away that I'm considering for my parents' retirement gift. The collective gasp from my family was audible. Mom actually reached for a chair to steady herself. But here's what's really interesting. I continued, warming to my theme. While I was building my company, you all were building debt. Marcus, your real estate ventures are leveraged to the hilt. I had a background check done when Nexus was evaluating potential family conflicts of interest. Victoria, your modeling career has generated exactly $47,000 in income over the past 3 years, while your trust fund spending exceeds $600,000 annually. Marcus's face had gone white. You had us investigated. Standard due diligence for a major acquisition. They wanted to ensure no family members could create legal complications. I pulled up another document on my phone. Mom, Dad, your real estate portfolio is impressive, but it's also highly illiquid and carries significant maintenance costs. Your actual cash flow is much tighter than you pretend. The silence was deafening. For the first time in my life, I held all the cards: financial, emotional, and informational. Victoria's tears were flowing freely now, but they were no longer manipulative. They were the tears of someone whose entire worldview had just collapsed. Emma, we didn't know. We thought you were the one who needed help. I was the one who needed help, I said, 5 years ago, when I asked for $1,800. But you taught me something valuable that day. The difference between needing help and deserving help. I needed your support, but I didn't deserve it because I wasn't conforming to your expectations. Uncle Roberto tried to lighten the mood with nervous laughter. Well, this is certainly a surprise. Emma, with your success, maybe you could help some of the younger cousins with college expenses, like you helped me, I asked pointedly. I seem to remember asking you for a letter of recommendation for a scholarship, and you told me you didn't feel comfortable endorsing someone whose priorities weren't traditional. The family patriarch. My grandfather, who'd been silent through the entire confrontation, finally spoke up from his wheelchair. Mia, I always said you had fire in you. Maybe we should have listened better. His honesty was refreshing, but it came decades too late. Mom tried one more approach, her voice pleading. Emma, we made mistakes. We see that now, but surely we can work past this. You're our daughter. We love you. Do you? I asked. Because love usually involves showing up. It involves believing in someone's dreams even when you don't understand them. It involves helping when help is needed, not just when it's convenient. I looked around at these faces that had shaped my childhood, my insecurities, my drive to prove myself. You love the idea of me now that I'm successful. You love what I can provide, but you've never loved who I actually am. Dad stepped forward, his voice breaking slightly. Emma, please, don't let pride destroy our family. I'm not destroying anything, I replied calmly. I'm just finally strong enough to see what was already broken. I walked out of the house where I'd grown up feeling inadequate, leaving behind a family that had finally learned the cost of their assumptions. The call started before I'd even reached my car. My phone buzzed with texts, voicemails, and missed calls from various family members, all suddenly very interested in maintaining close contact with their newly wealthy relative. I let them go to voicemail as I drove back to San Francisco, knowing I needed space to process what had just happened. By the time I reached my penthouse, there were 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. The messages ranged from, defensive, we always supported you. You're just choosing to remember things differently, to manipulative. Mom is crying and won't stop talking about how she failed you. Too transparently, opportunistic, would love to discuss some investment opportunities with you. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my balcony, looking out at the San Francisco Bay while my phone continued to buzz incessantly. This was exactly what I'd feared the moment my family discovered my wealth. I'd become a target rather than a daughter. The most telling message came from Marcus M. I know today was intense, but family is family. Let's talk about how we can work together moving forward. I have some real estate deals that could use your expertise and capital. Your expertise and capital, not your forgiveness, not your presence, not your happiness, my money and my connections. That night, I called my lawyer, the same firm that had handled the Nexus acquisition. I need to establish clear legal boundaries with my biological family, I explained. Nothing extreme, but I need documentation that protects me from financial manipulation or harassment. Within a week, I had a comprehensive legal strategy. The documents I drafted weren't quite restraining orders, but they were formal notices that established clear boundaries. First, a cease and desist letter regarding financial solicitations. Any family member requesting money, investments, or financial assistance would need to go through my legal team and financial advisors. Personal relationships would not be mixed with business relationships. Second, a formal statement that my financial success was not a family asset. Despite their apparent belief that my wealth somehow belonged to all of them, I clarified that my money was mine alone, earned through my own efforts, and would be distributed according to my own values and priorities. Third, a requirement that all family contact be respectful and focused on rebuilding genuine relationships rather than accessing financial resources. The letter made it clear that I was willing to work on family relationships, but only if they were based on mutual respect rather than financial dependence. The responses were exactly what I expected. Dad called it unnecessarily harsh and hurtful. To the family, Mom cried and said I was becoming someone she didn't recognize. Marcus accused me of letting success go to my head and forgetting where I came from. Victoria surprised me with the most honest response. Emma, I understand why you're doing this. We've treated you terribly, and now we're treating you like an ATM. I'm sorry. Her acknowledgement was the first genuine apology I'd received from any family member. It gave me hope that perhaps some relationships could be salvaged, but only after significant changes in how they approached me. The legal boundaries weren't about punishment, they were about protection. I'd learned that sudden wealth could poison family relationships just as easily as poverty could strain them. The difference was that now I had the resources to protect myself from manipulation. I also established a family trust that would provide modest support for genuine emergencies or educational expenses, administered by independent trustees, removed me from the position of being asked to be the family bank while still ensuring that real needs could be met. The boundaries were clear. I was willing to be a daughter, sister, and family member, but I was no longer willing to be their financial solution to problems they'd created through poor planning and entitled spending. 6 months after the Forbes revelation, I was sitting in my home office reading through the latest batch of thank you letters from recipients of the Rodriguez Foundation scholarships. The foundation I'd established provided full college funding for students who'd been dismissed or unsupported by their families' kids, like I had been, whose independence was seen as defiance rather than strength. Dear Ms. Rodriguez, wrote Maria Santos, an 18-year-old from Phoenix. Because of your scholarship, I can pursue computer science at MIT without worrying about my parents' disapproval or financial pressure. You've shown me that family doesn't have to limit your dreams, sometimes they can inspire you to dream bigger. These letters had become my new family photos, evidence of relationships, built on mutual support rather than shared DNA. Each scholarship recipient reminded me that my journey had a purpose beyond personal vindication. My biological family had slowly adjusted to our new reality. The daily calls and texts had stopped after my legal boundaries were established. Dad had attempted a few awkward lunch invitations, clearly struggling with how to relate to a daughter who no longer needed his approval or financial guidance. Mom sent occasional texts with articles about successful families rebuilding relationships, but she'd stopped offering unsolicited advice about my life choices. Marcus had been the most resistant to change. His real estate ventures had taken several hits during the economic downturn, and I'd heard through extended family that he'd been hoping for a bailout that never materialized. My refusal to invest in his projects had forced him to actually learn business fundamentals for the first time in his life. Victoria, surprisingly, had been the most genuine in her attempts to rebuild our relationship. She'd started therapy to address her dependency issues and had even enrolled in community college to develop actual skills beyond modeling. Our occasional coffee meetings were still awkward, but they felt authentic in a way our interactions never had before. The most telling moment came during Uncle Roberto's 70th birthday party, which I attended after carefully considering whether family gatherings could be healthy for me. The dynamic was completely different. Relatives who used to offer pity now sought advice, and those who used to dismiss my opinions now hung on my every word about technology and business. But the most meaningful change was in how I viewed family itself. My team at Nexus had become like siblings, people who'd supported my vision when it was just sketches on napkins. My mentor network of other tech entrepreneurs provided the guidance and wisdom I'd never received at home. The local Link user community had taught me more about human connection than any family dinner ever had. The thank you letters scattered across my desk represented something my biological family had never understood: the power of investing in people's potential rather than controlling their choices. Each scholarship recipient was proof that being underestimated could become a superpower if you found the right support system. As I finished reading the latest letters, my phone buzzed with a text from Dad. "Saw your interview on CNN about the foundation. Very proud of what you're building." I smiled at the message. It wasn't an apology for the years of dismissal, but it was acknowledgement that my path, the one they'd discouraged, had led to something meaningful. Sometimes the greatest gift parents can give their children is the motivation to prove them wrong. 1 year later, I stood in the same penthouse where this journey had begun, holding a new magazine cover. This time, it was Time's Entrepreneur of the Year issue, featuring my work with the Rodriguez Foundation and the expansion of local links community building technology to underserved populations worldwide. The tagline read, "From family outcast to global changemaker, how Emma Rodriguez is redefining success." The past year had brought changes I never could have anticipated. Local links technology had been integrated into educational platforms, helping students find study partners and mentors across economic divides. The Rodriguez Foundation had awarded over 200 scholarships to dismissed children who'd gone on to excel in fields their families had discouraged. My relationship with my biological family had stabilized into something new, not the unconditional love I'd once craved, but a respectful distance that allowed for occasional connection without manipulation or disappointment. Dad's birthday this year had been different. A small dinner where we discussed my work with genuine interest rather than condescending concern. But the most profound change was in my understanding of worth itself. The Forbes cover that had started this revelation now sat framed in my office, not as a trophy of vindication, but as a reminder of a larger truth. Our value isn't determined by who believes in us, but by what we build with that belief. I'd learned that families come in many forms. Some you're born into, some you choose, some you create through shared missions and values. The scholarship recipients who sent me updates from college, the local link users who'd found their communities, the team members who'd helped build something revolutionary. These relationships had taught me that love is an action, not an obligation. The phone rang, interrupting my reflection. It was Sarah, my former study partner and current CTO, calling with news that Local Link had been chosen to power community building initiatives for the United Nations. "Emma," she said, "remember when we were debugging code in your car? Did you ever imagine we'd be changing how the world connects?" I looked out at the San Francisco Bay, thinking about that scared college student who'd slept in parking lots while building her dreams. She'd been looking for family approval, but she'd found something better: the power to approve of herself. My family had said I was nothing without them. They were wrong. I was everything I needed to be, and I'd built the life to prove it.